Well, today has been my day for technical difficulties. I'm not sure why I've had so many technical difficulties today, but here we are and we're ready to go. And uh, welcome to the final session of uh, Module 3. Um, whoops. Well, guess what? Um, my slideshow did not upload properly. Okay, so we're going to have to do it the hard way. I'm going to have to show it from my screen share, which is a little bit different. Share my slide presentation here, and we'll just go to a full screen. And we should be here. So the only problem is I can't see any of my controls and I can't see any of the chat because it's not uploaded properly. And if I take it out of it like that, then you can't see. Let's see if I can just make it presenter view. Okay. And this is a little bit annoying. Okay. Well, I'm not going to be able to see the controls. So let's start out tonight. We're going to be talking about symbolic journeys and mental tools. And again, the technical difficulties today. Just been really a crazy day for technical difficulties. This is a really, really important class. I'm going to just come back to my webcam for a minute. And maybe I just will keep it like this so I can actually see what's going on, and I'll just minimize this over to the side and you'll be able to see it just fine. Won't be as pretty, but it will work. So here, let's go on to the chat. Hi, everybody. Anyway, so this is a topic that I find really interesting. When I'm talking about it, I always have a little bit of concern because what I'm going to share with you is actually a little bit strange. If you've never encountered it or you've never experienced it, and yet I'm going to tell you it's really, really powerful. I mean, some of the most interesting and powerful emotion healing sessions I've done have involved the use of symbolic journeys and mental tools. So I want to give a little bit of background on this because I think it's very important to understand this. First of all, to understand the power of imagination. This quote from one of my favorite books, Awakening Conversations with the Masters by Anthony DeMello, where he says, when words and thoughts are silenced, the universe blooms forth, real and whole and one, and words become what they were meant to be, the score, not the music. In other words, when you look at musical notes on a page, that's a representation of the music, but the singer has to sing it or the orchestra has to play it, and then it becomes music. The menu, not the food. In other words, the menu is not the meal. The menu is basically describing the meal. The signpost, not the journey's end. Words are symbols. Words are not reality. And yet we get caught up in words almost as if they were reality. But our mind, this is another quote I had from a book I really liked. Our mind, in this analogy, is compared to a pool of water. And that pool of water is extremely sensitive. And what she says here is this pool or mirror of the sacred spirit is sensitive beyond comprehension. Every thought and feeling and even disturbing word shatters the stillness of its repose. In some, it is only a restless, turbulent, seething, storm-tossed, disquieted pool. And as long as this sea remains turbulent and disturbed by wrong thinking, just so long will the outer conditions reflect that upheavaled condition in a man's life. In other words, The pool of the mind, if it's disturbed by constant monkey chatter and negative thinking and all this sort of thing, will create that same kind of chaos and disturbance outside of ourselves. And what we learn to do is to quiet that mind, to still or calm. And you think of it metaphorically as a pool of water. You calm that pool of water so it becomes absolutely perfectly still. Now, when it's turbulent, you can't see any reflection in it at all. But if you get a pool that's completely still, an image can form on the surface of the pond. And you can also see into the pond. And that meditative state of quieting the mind, so the mind is still, it's not racing around like a chicken with its head cut off, has been called by some people sacred silence. Now, I talked about this in a previous session about, the idea of Christian meditation, of being able to use meditation, which a lot of Christians are afraid of, to still the mind so you can use your mind in a different way. And when you're able to still the mind, you have the ability to connect with something called inner vision, the ability to see within, to see from the spiritual dimension, or to have vision. So when we talk about a person who has vision, they have in their mind an image of something that they want, they desire, that's driving or moving them. Native Americans called that same state of mind dream time. And what was interesting is I found this book by a man who had lived in the Middle Eastern world in the Aramaic culture in which the Bible emerged. And one of the things he talked about is the fact that many metaphors, many terminologies used in the Bible were translated literally when they really were metaphors. I mean, like if I say, go pick up your room, I don't mean go grab your room and lift up the room. I mean, tidy up the room, right? I mean, these are called, sorry, I need to calm myself down here. These kinds of terms that we use, like bury the hatchet, blah, blah, if you translate them literally, they don't mean what they mean in terms of the metaphorical meaning. And what he explains is in that culture, when a person says, I was in the Spirit, or the Spirit came upon me, or the word of the Lord came unto me, that's well understood is that I was in meditation and I had a vision. And that really puts a different light on some of the things that you find in scriptures when you understand that this happens on a different state of existence. You see, our pure mind, our real mind, does not think in words, because words are simply symbols. Okay, the deeper part of our mind that was active when we were children before language was superimposed on it thinks in mental images, in pictures, and also we have a thinking that comes emotionally, a sense of intuition that comes to us from a feeling or a sensation that we have. And that's the deeper language of the mind. So when we talk about envisioning or visioning or using visualization or imaging in imagination, we're talking about contacting a part of our mind that goes way beyond words and is closer to our experience of reality than our current mind is. And all of this is I'm doing to set up how this all works. This is from a book called Awakening Spirits by Tom Brown Jr. Prayer, in essence, is a verbal form of visualization, but I believe that mere words are not enough in true prayer. In order to communicate with the worlds beyond the flesh, we must use the same language as those worlds use to reach us. We must learn to use the language of vision, dream, sign, symbol, and feeling. And I know that Wayne Dyer talks about this. He talks about what you're seeking, you create the image of it in your mind, the image as if you already have it, and imbue that with passion and desire. Napoleon Hill talked about the same thing, that our mind can hold a vision of something, and when that's imbued with strong emotion, it actually creates a driving force. So it is only when one's turbulent, discordant thoughts are stilled and in the quiet repose that he can comprehend the powers of this sacred font. It is into this quieted sea of spirit. In other words, if you think of your deepest level of mind as being connected to a spiritual dimension, when you purify that, when you remove the negativity and the unrighteous desires of that, and you learn to still that all and still all that turbulence that goes on inside of you, then that sacred pool of your mind can be placed the images of what you want to be fulfilled, and you basically imagine or image them in. Okay, this is a matter of faith. This is explaining the concept of doing things by faith in a very pragmatic way of trying to explain how you actually exercise faith. And so an exercise you can do for this is to sit and lay comfortably, breathe deeply, relax your body, create a singular focus for your mind, which can be just a repetitive thought or staring at something, and basically learn to quiet or still the thoughts in your mind so you are not having this constant verbal chatter going on. You calm your mind, and into that you pray, or you to the Father, and you place the image of your righteous desire. I specify righteous desire because unrighteous desires are things that are selfish and benefit you at the expense of others. If your desire is righteous, it may benefit you, but it's not going to not be beneficial to others. And the best kind of desires are those desires where you're seeking the welfare of others, not just seeking your own welfare, but seeking the welfare of others. And in that, you then put that image and you hold on to it. You basically give it substance, which kind of explains this, that faith is the substance of something you hope for and the evidence of something you have not yet seen. And I think it's very valid to realize that everything that we see in our modern world was created by faith. Faith is not just a religious, i.e. spiritual principle. It is literally the action by which all creativity takes place. Everyone who has ever created anything, whether it was a musical piece or an art piece or a scientific invention or built a piece of furniture. I mean, I just tore up our very, very badly constructed front porch, and we built a new porch. And I created that porch in my mind before I created it in reality. I figured out what I needed to do to build it. I created a design in my head. I laid it out on paper. I wrote down a cost of materials. And the principle of faith is what allows me to take what I envision in my brain and translate it into something that's real in the world. Now, if I didn't have faith that I could build the porch, I would never even get started. But if I have faith I can build the porch, I can create the image of it in my mind, I can create the things, I can analyze the process, I can begin it. So faith motivates everything that's ever done. Every invention was created by faith. So faith is, and when you understand that, then you understand how, with the help of God, all things are possible, because if you are able to create it in your brain and believe that it can become reality, it will then start motivating your choices, your thoughts, your actions, your feelings, everything, until it is brought into being. But then add this, but let him ask in faith, nothing wavering, for he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. And that's the same kind of idea that Annalise Scarin is talking about when she's talking about the inner pool of the mind, that if the inner pool of your mind is disturbed with fear and anxiety and and selfish desire and all of these other things that are constantly making your mind turbulent and negative and having bad thoughts, you cannot exercise faith because you can't calm your mind and control your mind and bridle your passions and seek that which is good and noble, uplifting, and take it to the Father in prayer and hold it in your mind as the substance of what has not yet become reality. You understand? It's it's being able to take something that has not yet become reality, does not yet exist, and bring it into existence. That's the power of faith. And so literally we are always operating by faith, and what we perceive ourselves capable of doing is really limited by our faith in what we believe. So in other words, if I have an image and I think it's impossible to do, then it is impossible. So this is something that takes practice. If you learn to quiet your mind, you can start exploring, saying, Father, what would be the solution to the problem I have? And you quiet your mind, and instead of sitting there and engaging in analysis paralysis and trying to reason it all through and everything, you just put that thought into the stillness of your mind and calm your mind and wait. And I've done this many times, and answers will come, ideas will come, things that can be given to you if you learn to have patience. You can also put the most noble desires of your heart into that very sacred innermost chamber of your being, if you can learn to quiet your mind. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up right now is because this also can be used to facilitate both physical and emotional healing in someone. And one of the things I've been telling people for a long time about emotional healing is that it begins with seeing the person whole. In other words, right now, the person doesn't appear to be whole, but you see them as there is nothing wrong with them. And you then approach the healing process from the standpoint that you're not changing them into something that they are not. You're not fixing something that's wrong with them. You're removing everything that prevents them from being who and what they really are, which is a divine son or daughter of God. In other words, you're actually restoring the truth of who they are, and everything else is a deception. And that's actually the standpoint that I approach emotional healing from, and that I've taught all the people who are successful at doing it to approach it. You're not there to fix the person. You're there to help them remove all the things that make them think there's something wrong with them, so that they can get back to having a belief system that allows them to move forward in a constructive way. And I believe that in terms of actually healing someone physically, you have to be able to do the same thing. You have to, in your mind, perceive them as whole, as healed, that their body is totally capable of regenerating itself, doing whatever it needs to be healed. Now, that's hard to do because, we get programmed with this idea that things are impossible. It's impossible. You can't do it. But if all things are possible to him that believeth, then it just is a matter of exercising our faith and learning to utilize that faith to make changes in the world. And I use this all the time to get inspiration and revelation to guide me in my life. And this is my own way of looking at this. And I believe that the grand illusion that we labor under is that what is going on in the outer physical world is causing what is going on inside of us mentally and emotionally. In other words, I am negative because the world is negative. I feel bad because bad things are happening to me in my life. When in reality, I've come to realize it's the other way around. That what is inside of us is being projected into our life, and that it is the spiritual dimension, which is the inner dimension, the inner dimension of that pool of our mind and heart and soul, that is projecting outward into our life the turbulence and everything that's causing all the problems. And that the way to change what's outside of us is by changing what is inside of us. In other words, another way, as I put it on here, of saying this is that the spiritual world is the higher world. And it is from the spiritual dimension that the conditions of the lower world are created, which is why we need to change our thought processes in the way we approach these things. Because, as the scripture suggests, flesh and blood, other people are not our enemy, but principalities and powers of darkness in the rulers of darkness of the world. It's spiritual forces that are acting upon the people in this world that are creating these conditions. And we don't necessarily want to try to battle them in the physical world. We want to battle them in the inner spiritual world. And as we overcome them in the inner spiritual world, the outer world will respond in kind. In other words, through the power of our faith, of our laying hold of what is possible and holding on to it, we help to bring into being positive changes in the world. Now, I realize this is really difficult stuff, and some of you, it may you might feel very uncomfortable with it. I apologize. I mean, I know in advance. One of the things I want to tell you is I don't want anybody listening to me to ever do anything that doesn't feel right to you. If something doesn't feel right to you and it's unsettling to your soul, don't do it. Okay? Don't listen to me. Go to God. Take things to God and let God guide you, not me. I'm just another person, just like you. Okay? And therefore, you have to learn to let God guide you. Now, what we're going to talk about now, and it looks like I'm going to go a little over tonight, because it's going to take a little bit longer than usual, is we're going to talk first of all about symbolic journeys. Many times what happens is people aren't able to directly face what's going on inside of them. So their subconscious mind projects that message to them in symbolic form, presents it to them using symbolic language. And that's what a symbolic journey is. They make a journey in their mind, in their innermost being, that is a representation of what the problem is. Now, why symbolism? Okay, well, let me explain what the value of symbolism is on a spiritual point. If you've never experienced something, for example, if you've never had a spiritual experience, let's say you have had a spiritual experience and you're trying to explain a spiritual experience to someone who's never had one. How do you do that? Because language, words being symbols of reality, can only transmit understanding when two people have had the same experience linked to the same symbol, so that therefore the symbol can transmit the idea of shared experience. When you don't have shared experience, you resort to symbolism. And symbolism occurs in the form of something of some physical thing or process resembling another physical thing or process, and it's found in the poetic devices of metaphor and simile. So, like if you've eaten some food that the other person has ever eaten, you say, "Well, it is like this." That's called simile. All right. Metaphor means you directly substitute the thing. Instead of saying it's like this, you say it is this. So like I say, simile would be my love is like a red, red rose. Metaphor would be my love is a red rose. Okay. It's likening, but either way, it's using the rose to symbolize something that is spiritual. That's why symbolism is really valuable. My father taught me this little process of a symbolic journey. He learned it from a psychologist when he was in California. And he used to do this with people. And I was amazed at how accurate he was in understanding what was going inside of people by telling them to do this. So we're going to just do this really quickly here. I want you to imagine you're walking through a forest, and I want you to picture the forest in your mind. And of course, you can't describe it to me for real, but just kind of in yourself, think about the forest and what it's like and what you see there. All right. And after you've got those images in your brain, then you come to a body of water. What is the body of water? And when you do come to the water, what do you do when you come to the water? So I'll let you think about that for a minute. And now you find a key. Okay. Think about the key. What key do you see? And picture it in your brain, get a good image of it. Then go on a little further and you find a vase. Okay. What is the vase like? What shape is it? What color is it? Does it have a design? Does it not have a design? So forth. This was a very interesting one. This is one has always been one of the most interesting ones to me. Now you find a house. Okay. What is the house like? Picture the house in your mind. All right. Once you get that in your mind and move on, now you come to a barrier, a wall, a fence, some kind of barrier. What is the barrier you come to? And what do you do when you get there? Now, I just took you on a symbolic journey, and let me explain what it means. The forest is a symbol of life, the world around you. And what you see when you visualize the forest is a metaphor or a symbol of your life, of the world around you. I have done this a few times myself, and I've had a few people who are having a very, very difficult time in life, and that was reflected in the kind of forest that they saw. One person described a jungle in the midst of a pouring rain, and he was having to hack his way through the jungle going uphill. Another girl I knew described a forest of weeping willows at midnight. There's a lot of little sub-symbols in that about seeing paths or seeing light or seeing birds or other things that you can look at it that help explain about how a person views their life. But generally speaking, if you had a beautiful forest and you felt good, then you have a pretty positive outlook on life. But like I said, some people who have really strange outlooks have very distorted images of the forest. The body of water, water represents life, my dad said, and it represents also the fountain of life, creativity and procreativity. So it partly represents your ability to create, but it also has a lot to do with how you experience thinking about the opposite sex. My dad one time had a person who described a pool of water with blood in it, and he didn't try to interpret that. But afterwards, one of the people came up and said, well, just in the last week, his father had murdered his mother. I had people who described a stinking pond of water. Okay. How you interact with it is how comfortable you are with your own creative ability and also your own sexuality. And I won't get into all of the things about that, but there's a lot of sub-symbolism in that. The key represents opportunity. It unlocks doors. It opens things up. Skeleton keys open many doors, so see many possibilities. People who are more practical often see a car key or a house key or something like that that's more pragmatic, so they see their future and their opportunity as more practical. Vase represents artistic temperament. My dad was really good at interpreting how a person's artistic temperament was from their description of the vase. I'm not as good at that. The house is the one that's always the most interesting to me because the house represents how you see yourself. Whether you see yourself as humble, whether you see yourself, as grand, how I mean, I had people who had very poor self-images who described houses with caved-in roofs. I had one kid who described a teeny little house sandwiched between two skyscrapers. He felt overwhelmed by his mom and dad. But the reason house represents that is house is a place in which you dwell. So it's sort of like your spirit dwelling in your body. You dwell in the house, and the house that you are there is something that you're comfortable with, unless, of course, there's some image in your mind. But if there happens to be something in your mind that's disturbing you, a lot of times you'll just see some kind of disturbance there. A barrier represents something that prevents you from getting where you want to go. It's a barrier to the future. It's a barrier to moving forward in your life, and how you deal with that barrier, whether you leap over it, find a way to crawl over it, or you just sit down and give up and turn around, is a lot about how you approach obstacles in life. Now, I've done this myself many times. I watched my dad do it. It is amazing how uncannily accurate this symbolistic stuff is. And that, I think, was one of the things that prepared me for understanding when people took symbolic journeys. Now, I have a way of helping people start a symbolic journey. If question affirmations aren't working, and having a person get directly into their experience and how they felt about it isn't working, then one way to get them to start a symbolic or visual journey is to tell them to imagine that their life is a long hallway with many doors, and each door represents a life experience they've had. And the hallway leads from where they are now back to the beginning of their life. And you tell them, and if they can visualize that, because some people don't visualize very well. So if this is not a person who visualizes well, this is not a good exercise for them to do. But if they're a very visual person, this is a really good way to get into the emotional healing process. You tell them to walk down the hall and stop at any door that appeals to them, and then open the door and see what's inside. I remember the first time I tried this. I can't even remember where I learned this tool, but someone told me about this, and so I tried it. And this woman opened the door on a torture chamber. There were all these instruments of torture in there, and she described this, and I said, "Well, what does this represent?" She says, "My first marriage." Well, that's symbolic journey. In other words, her first marriage was so awful that she literally felt like she was in a torture chamber. And she felt like she was in a torture chamber. That's the way metaphorically she's trying to describe it. So I've had people open up doors on real events in their life, but I've also had them open up doors on into a slime pit, into all these really strange images that represent some, difficult experience in their life that they are having trouble directly accessing, but they access it through symbolism. One thing I learned to do is with everything in emotional healing is when they do access a symbolic representation of something, I ask them, and how does this make you feel? How does this slime pit make you feel? How does this torture chamber make you feel? Because we're always trying to get them into their heart, into their feelings. Now, if it's a real event in their life, we're trying to get them into how did that person feel? If they're a woman, and this is an event from their childhood, how did that little girl feel? How did that little boy feel? Like I said, as they go through this mental journey, you're going to guide them through this mental journey. And one of the ways you guide them through a symbolic journey is by using mental tools. Now, mental tools can be used without symbolic journeys. You can use them. I've used mental tools in a lot of emotional healing situations that nobody ever knew I did them. I was using them because they're entirely happening inside of your own mind. So let's talk a little bit about mental tools. Okay, a mental tool is basically an image that you have of something that will help the situation at hand. Now, the two people introduced me to this idea. One of them talked about it being like your spiritual caddy. He says, you're on the golf course and you say, give me the my putter, give me my 9-iron or whatever, and your caddy gives you the appropriate club to use in the given situation. Well, your spiritual caddy gives you the appropriate mental tool to use in the right situation. Of course, obviously, if we're approaching this from a truly spiritual perspective, we pray and ask God, what can I use to help this person in this particular problem? And if you know how to quiet your mind so that you can let images and thoughts pop in your head, you will see these ideas pop into your head. And using your own imagination, you imagine yourself using that tool on whatever the situation is to fix it. So I'm going to give you some examples of mental tools. Although I think for just a second, I'm going to stop the screen share. I'm going to see if there's any really interesting comments here. Yeah, just a second. Yeah, when I talked about seeing someone as whole and perfect, I'm thinking that's the way God sees them. He doesn't. When you have an acorn, right? An acorn has the potential to be an oak tree, right? But as an acorn, it doesn't look like an oak tree. So what I believe is that God sees us as the finished product, not as where we are in the stage of getting there, if that makes sense. And so to help a person move through their spiritual growth and development, you have to see them as God sees them in their final perfected form, okay? Where he is seeking to take them, not where they are right now. This is very, very important, okay? If you fall asleep when you try to relax and empty your mind, you probably need more sleep. I would suggest starting to, try to do it sitting up rather than lying down. And someone also mentions getting symbolism in dreams. Yes, and that also is a good thing. So let's go back again to the PowerPoint presentation. I apologize that I didn't get it loaded properly, so it kind of looks funny on the screen, but I'm sure you can still see it. So the other person who told me about mental tools was a chiropractor I used to go to, and he told me this. He said he carried a rose in his heart. And whenever he saw anyone who looked sad or lonely or discouraged, just even walking down the street or talking to the grocery cashier or whatever, in his mind, he took the rose out of his heart. It was a little rose in a vase, he said, and he gave it to the person with love. Here is a gift of love. And he told me that he'd literally seen someone walking down the street with their head, and as soon as he did this, they would look up. And in other words, it seemed to have a real effect. And you don't have to be in the physical presence of a person to do that. Another image I got from a different source was imagining a warm blanket of love that you wrap around the person. So you literally go in your mind and you put forth this image of some image of love or protection or help, and you picture the person and you do this just to them in their mind with a prayer of blessing them, okay? And as I would do, blessing them in the name of Jesus, He also taught me the Searchlight. He said when he had a project that he needed, he basically imagined that he had a lighthouse or a searchlight on top of his head. The searchlights that they use to say, oh, there's a sale here, or there's a carnival or a festival here, and they're putting it out in the sky to attract attention, whatever. He put that out there to say, okay, I need resources. I need the people to help me achieve this thing. And so forth. I mean, one way of doing that is, let's say that you're trying to build a business. You basically ask God to send you the people that he wants you to help. And you imagine there's a light going out from you, or imagine that God is sending out angels to go bring to you the clients or the customers or the people that need your help, and that they will be drawn to you. Okay? It's using the process of imagination so that your prayer or your desire that you want to with God isn't just words. It goes into the deeper form of imaging in, and especially it helps if that also includes emotion. My other friend, the one who told me about the spiritual caddy, talked about you're in the presence of someone who is being very, negative. They're attacking you or whatever. All of us have had that experience, and we want to get really defensive and so forth. He says you just put on your armor. You remain in your place of love, but you put on this armor so that everything they say is just deflected off of you. And you construct that armor of light and love. So you imagine yourself surrounded either with a suit of armor or a bubble of light and love, that any negativity that comes at you is transformed and comes away from you as love, going back to the person. Okay. And so that's another example of a mental tool of creating a mental image of what you want. Napoleon Hill had 10 invisible helpers that he recruited, that he basically assigned each one of them, one to protect his health, one to protect his finances. He had an errand boy named Norm Hill, which he used for everything else. And whether those people were real or not, Napoleon Hill said he basically made in his mind a council of famous people, Jesus Christ being one of them, but other people that he admired and whatever. And when he had a problem to tackle, he would sit down with this council of people in his mind and turn and say, what advice do you have to give me? It's a very interesting exercise to do these kinds of things. And again, a lot of people are maybe they're a little nervous about this. Maybe they think this is something bad or evil or whatever. This stuff to me is a tool. And all tools can be used for good or evil. You can use a hammer to build something, or you can use a hammer to bash someone's head. You can use a gun to protect someone from harm, or you can use a gun to cause someone harm. And everything I'm telling you about mental tools, you are, whether you realize it or not, using these already. So what I'm encouraging you to do is most of the time you're using them unconsciously, because you're letting random images that have been programmed into your head, words and thoughts and images that play over and over and over and over and over again in your mind to create negative experiences and bad things in your life. If you learn to start practicing the control over your mind and your heart, to quiet that, to make the pool of your inner spirit calm, learn how to go in and calm that down and feel. When I get out of the turbulence, because sometimes something happens, like, I found out I'd overdrawn my checking account the other night, and had to make an emergency transfer of funds out of my savings account and everything. And I've been struggling a little bit with the finances lately. And so all of a sudden, all the negative thoughts come in, blah, 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 blah. And I have to sit there and pray and quiet my mind, say, everything's well, get peaceful inside. When I do that, I can feel God's love. I know God is protecting me. I know God is taking care of me. And then into that, in place of that turbulence, that negative thinking, I place the thought, God is with me, all is well, everything will be taken care of, blah, 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 and change the inner dialogue, the inner image, and so forth. And I've been doing this, by the way, more and more. As I've started to really even understand better how this works, I'm doing this all the time. I'm throwing, thoughts and prayers for my kids, both my step kids and my real kids, and for things with my business. Every time I find myself getting into any kind of a negative thought or whatever, or worry or concern, I calm my mind down. I say a prayer, and I put forth, in the name of Jesus, the image of something good, taking the place of the image that's negative. And I have noticed a difference. I have noticed a big difference in things that I've been doing this with. This seems really simple and maybe even to some people even stupid, but I guarantee that if you are doing this with the good and noble intent and in a Christ-like manner. In fact, I just so that you I read this very interesting thing in a book that said that the Hebrew, where it says in the name, that's translated in the English as in the name of Jesus Christ, could also be translated in the manner of Jesus Christ. In other words, what we do in imitation of what Jesus did, that is another way of saying in the name of Christ. So in other words, if we look at Jesus going around and blessing people and healing people and so forth, if we go out with the same intent to bring forth good in the world in the manner of Christ, as he did, following his example, then we are given the power to be able to do these things. So that's another way of looking at that. Now, these are actually specific mental tools that I have used in emotional healing work. The tools I gave earlier are things that you can use, anywhere. These are specific things that literally, as I was doing emotional healing work, I would think, what do I do? And what do I need? And these images would come to mind and I would use them. And they would make dramatic transformations in the healing process of the person I was using them on, even though I never told them what I was doing. I never said a single word. I was only holding these images in my mind as I was working with them. And one of the things I ran into is this feeling of people feeling very unclean who have been sexually abused. Like I'm a dirty person, I'm evil, I'm bad, this dark negativity that they have about themselves. And as I would pray for help in helping them overcome this, images would come to my mind like a washcloth that I would just literally in my mind, I would be washing away all of the dirt and garbage out of their soul. Or I've had this image of like a hose, like I have here, or maybe even a pressure washer, and sit there and just squirt all the dirt out of them and wash it away. And one of the weirdest ones was a bottle brush. I don't know if any of you do canning and you've used the little bottle brush or had baby bottles and used the baby bottle brush. I had this image of a bottle brush, and I've actually used this quite a few times. And I shoved it in through the top of their head and went all the way down to their root energy, and just sitting there going back and forth, scrubbing their inside out to get rid of this toxic shame and feeling of uncleanness, and it would help them move past this. Don't know exactly how this works. I'm going to explain what I think is going on as we come to the end of this. This is one of the other ones that came that is extremely powerful. When I would talk to people and they would describe like pain in their heart, or they would often use words like I feel like I've been stabbed in the back, or I feel like I've been shot through the heart. And I would tell them to describe that. And they would literally describe this like a knife stuck in their back, or like an arrow or a dart that was shot and pierced their heart, just like the image here. And so I would picture this thing that they were describing, and I would imagine it as if it was real. If there really was a knife in their back, or there really was an arrow shot through their heart, and I would put my hand over their back or over their heart where they told me this was, and I would visualize it in my mind, and I would feel it. I would imagine I could feel it, like I was physically grabbing hold of it with my fingers. And I would sit there and start tugging on it. And I would tell the person, it's time to let go of this. Are you ready to let go of this? Are you ready to give this up? And they would often be reluctant to give it up. It's odd that people, are afraid sometimes to give up their pain because it's all they've known. But when and here's the other thing. When I would do this sometimes, the most intense sensations of emotional pain and betrayal would run through my body, and I would feel in this incredible empathy. My heart would sometimes just literally feel like it was breaking for them as I would feel this pain that they were holding on to inside. And I encouraged them to let go, not to let go of it, but I would keep hold of it and keep experiencing with them. And when I sensed that they were ready to let go of it, it was like I could feel it come loose. And I would, I would literally, let me make sure I can see my screen. I would literally just suddenly go, and I would throw it into the ground. And I am not kidding you. Every single time I have done this, the pain was immediately gone. There was no more emotional pain. Explain that. That's a really interesting thing to experience. It's like there's a reality there that you're tapping into. The other one, now those things always take place in the back, or in the chest, or over the heart area, heart lung area, front and back. What people often describe also is this sensation of this yucky little, bug-like, slimy, yucky, leechy, I don't know, different descriptions of them, parasites attached somewhere in their abdomen, like it was sucking the life energy out of them. And again, I would say, all right, describe it. How big is it? What color is it? What shape is it? Give it form, in your head. And as they would do that and tell me where it was located, again, I would put my fingers over that, and I would imagine I was doing psychic surgery. I would imagine my fingers were penetrating through their body, into their body, grabbing hold of this little dark entity. I kind of made a little illustration here of like this little like star-like thing clinging to the inside of this person's body. And I would get the image of that and I would grab hold of it. And again, most interesting, I would often experience incredible empathetic pain. Like, I will tell you two specific instances of this. One was a boy, and the history of this was that he had been taken away from his real mother at the age of 5 by Child Protective Services and put into a foster home. His mother punished him by locking him in a closet with no food and no water for up to 3 days at a time. When they found him at 5 years old, he weighed 18 pounds. He was nothing but skin and bones. He was nearly dead. His foster family had picked out a coffin for him. Everybody thought he was going to die. He had been through 4 abdominal surgeries to correct stuff that went on in his intestinal tract from this. And when I got into this, and he described the pain in his abdomen, and it was like this leech. And when I went in and I, in my brain, okay, I imagined my hand going into his body and grabbing this leechy thing that was inside of him. I suddenly was a 5-year-old locked in the closet, starving to death. That's the only way I can describe it. I felt everything that a 5-year-old locked in the closet, starving to death feels. It was the most gut-wrenching, horrible, sickening pain I had ever experienced in my entire life. It took everything in me, in the will, just to not just let go of it. But I tenaciously clung to it, and I said, let's get rid of this. And it took me several minutes to coax him to let go of it. But what I felt that thing go loose, and I jerked my hand back and threw it in the floor. He told me that was the first time in his life, the first time in his entire life that he could remember that he had no pain in his abdomen. This is powerful stuff. This is extremely powerful stuff. another one that I remember was a friend of mine, and he described inside of his intestines a round ball that was like a mushy, rotting peach. Okay. Slimy. And I reached in and got hold of it. And I felt, I don't remember so much feeling strongly the empathetic pain with that one, as that when I did that, he went back and had this visual imagery of his mother trying to abort him and sticking like a wire into her womb that went through him, stabbed him a couple of times. But because he was still in the developing stage, his body somehow held together and he didn't abort. And it was this pain of like what it's like for your mother to want to kill you. It was really, really intense. And again, when that came out of him, there was a profound interchange that took place with him once I had the sensation that released. This is another one that's really, really powerful. We talk about strings. We talk about, people having, pulling our strings, right? And what I have come to believe, and I'm just going to be very forthright with this, is that we are surrounded by a spiritual reality of which we are not fully aware. But it is just as real. In fact, in many cases, it's more real than the physical world in which we live, because it is the world that is causing the experience of the physical world. And that healing takes place on that dimension before it takes place on this dimension. So when we talk about, that I feel like someone stabbed me in the back, you literally are forming on the spiritual plane. Someone is forming on the spiritual plane of existence a weapon composed of some kind of subtle energy that actually pierces the person's soul, if you will, and is stuck there and has to be removed. Or there are actually like little dark kind of entities or something that, cling to people that have to be cast out. This case, we have invisible threads of connection that hook us to other people, hook us to our family, hook us to friends, hook us to people that we have relationships with. Having sex with someone creates extremely strong spiritual connections between you and that person, which is why I think casual sex is crazy, because you're creating very powerful spiritual connections with people that you don't even really know. And they affect you. And long after you are physically disconnected from a person through a divorce or a breakup of a relationship or something like that, or through alienation from a family member or whatever, the strings still exist. There's still an energy that's connecting to you, that person, that destroys your peace of mind. So I have people visualize these strings. Say, visualize the person in front of you and see the space in between of you and see the connections between you and them, the little threads of connection between you and them. And where are these in your body? And have them identify them. They may be in the heart, they may be in the genitals, they may be in the brain, they may be in different places. And so I have them pick one. Say, where is one? Well, it's here. Well, I go in and do the same thing. I imagine I'm got hold of that little thread, and I start getting ready to help them detach it. And we go through the process of saying, what is this? And it's always an expectation of something that they wish the other person would do for them. That they wish the other person would change. They wish the other person would blah, 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 blah. And I ask them if they're willing to let go of that expectation. They're willing just to release it, that they don't need it anymore, blah, blah, blah. And when they're ready to that point, you feel the string disconnect and you send that energy back to the person from it came with light and love. And it brings about peace. One of the times I remember trying this was someone who was connected to a cult. and they had all kinds of strings on him. The problem is that he wouldn't let go of some of them. As much as I tried to help him disconnect them, there were some that he would not let go of, and he wound up going back into the cult. So that was one of the ones where I didn't do this. I did this myself with someone. I've done this myself with people who, I had relationship in the past, and I felt like they could get to me with things that they said or things that they did. I went through the process of disconnecting all the strings, and that person could no longer affect me. They no longer could disturb my peace. This is also a real weird one, and I'm going to actually talk more about this in the next module about the crown energy, which is, I believe, where the person, spirit or soul or life force, whatever terminology you want to use, I don't know how terminology is basically pulled into their body. And in this case, people get beside themselves. They get out of themselves. They're not fully present in their body. Their life force, spirit, soul, whatever you want to call it, is not fully present in their body. They're disconnected from that somehow. And when I first encountered this and said, what do? I had this in vision of a great big net that actually spun like a propeller. And I could send it out, and it would pull their life energy and pull it in. And I had my hand over the top of their head like this. And I would imagine this spinning in, pulling in, and all their energy going back into their body. And then, like, sometimes it's this idea of a needle and thread, like tying it back into their body at their root energy, or anchoring it in some way back in their body, whatever. It's a very interesting thing. I could tell a lot of stories about that too, but I've run out of time. Okay, so the general directions for doing this. Like I said, this is something that is a very advanced emotional healing technique, which is why I saved it till now. It's extremely powerful. I could go on and on and on and on and on with story after story after story of using this tool, and envisioning these things and working with these things in my mind, and then having it affect the real world, having it actually make a change in the person that was sitting in front of me. I couldn't deny that something shifted. As soon as I felt something shift on that energetic level in the imagery in my mind, it shifted in reality in the real world. And so that's taught me a lot. It's taught me a lot about what faith is and about how you exercise faith. And it's something that I kind of pulled away from because it's a little bit scary. It's a little bit scary to think that you can have that kind of power. But what stopped making me scary is I realized we're doing it all the time, but we're doing it with stuff that's been planted in our minds by our culture and by our parents and by, dogmas and blah, 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 blah. And we're feeding into all those thoughts and helping to create this plane of existence. Why not consciously take control of this and start consciously creating good, in our mind with the help of God, and changing all of the images and thoughts going on in our mind, and learning how to direct that mental energy into a positive way. So get into a quiet meditative state, sacred silence, stilling the pool of your mind, whatever term. I don't get hung up on terminology. Whatever terminology works for you, use that terminology. Get a clear picture or image of the energy or problem you're dealing with. Pray and ask for the right tool to change that energy. And then in your mind, imagine yourself do it using that tool. And like I said, this has happened to me numerous times. I've done this with many, many different ways. Okay, so I might mention one other one. I did this with someone who'd been ritualistically abused and could not, had blocks in their memory. I could tell you a lot about that stuff too. And when I was visualizing why can't this person access their memories, I had this image of a concrete block at the base of their brain that was blocking them from accessing their memories. And I said, well, what do I do about this? And I got this image of a sledgehammer. So in my mind, I started whacking this concrete block with the sledgehammer, and And it was actually, oddly enough, almost physically tiring to do it. But I'd keep hitting it until it would crack. And what was interesting is she'd get a memory block, and then I would just sit there in my brain hitting this block, this concrete block in my mind with a sledgehammer. And as soon as I would feel this crack, she'd go, "Oh, I remember." And then she would start talking. And then she would hit another block, and I'd go back to hitting the concrete block, knocking another piece off. As soon as it cracked, another piece came off. She'd go, "Oh, I remember." And this happened like about 10 times in a row. Every time I, in my mind, saw this concrete block chip and part of it fall away, she would, in that same instant, say, "Oh, now I remember." How do you account for that? How do you account for that? That is the weirdest thing in the world. But like I said, I came to the conclusion that the spiritual world is influencing what's going on in this world. And the battle is in the spiritual world, not in the temporal world. And that the healing needs to take place first there in order to be brought here. So in other words, this is one of the reasons why I have so stressed, even in my physical healing work, the importance of the mind and emotions in the healing process, not just nutrition, not just detoxification, not just whatever, but actually helping a person believe that they can heal, believe that their body can recover, believe that they can get well. Because if they don't believe they can get well, they probably won't, right? So everything we need to do is to instill hope and faith in people. And I have some interesting things I will have to save for the next module, which I postponed starting it because I'm so overwhelmed. I pushed it back. I will be sending out announcements about when it's going to start, what the dates and everything will be. We're going to get into some the final stuff of going through the emotional healing model and pulling all these tools together. And I'll tell a lot more stories in that module too. But I just wanted to kind of lay all the groundwork for this, and then we'll move forward with this. When I say breathe into that part of the body, I have the person, as they breathe in, imagine that their breath is flowing into that area of their body. In other words, the breath is moving all the way down to their legs, or their breath is moving into their abdomen, or their breath is moving into their thing. It's like with the breath comes life energy, and you're imagining the life energy moving into that part of the body that's been numbed or shut off. And this is what I think. It's the working of the Holy Spirit in us, and it's one of the ways God works through us. It works through us in the spiritual gift. Now, I believe, I'm going to be really, really blunt. I believe multiple personality disorder is caused by spirit possession. I believe that when we, and I actually had a psychologist who was a very spiritual person tell me that he had observed this himself, working with insane, crazy people, that when we've been traumatized, one of the things we often do is disassociate. That is, we fail to occupy our body. We run away from life. We run away from the physical body. And when our body is not fully occupied by our spirit, other entities of various levels of malevolence, not all of them are evil spirits. Some of them are just disembodied spirits that are trying to be embodied, can actually move in and live in our body as well. And that when you experience a trauma or something that triggers a trauma vortex and you disassociate, that particular entity can then take control of the body. And he said he'd seen that many times. I've seen it happen. And he said the way he did it is he actually helped the person regain control of their own body, come back and inhabit their own body, because if they're inhabiting their own body, there's no room for this. And I actually worked with someone who was had severe trauma. severe accidents, other things that had happened to her as a very small girl. She told me she could not feel her body at all. When I tried to get her, breathe into your body, feel your body, she couldn't feel her body. I had to really work with her on helping her to get into her body and deal with this stuff, because what would happen to her is she would go to bed at night and not knowing how this happened, she would wake up next morning and she had basically gotten sleepwalking and destroyed things in the house. So I was pretty sure that, some other entity was partially inhabiting her body, because she wasn't inhabiting her body. Okay, look, I like I said, if you have trouble with any of the things I've said, okay, disregard anything that's you're uncomfortable with. Just disregard it. Only use the tools and the ideas that you feel comfortable with where you're at. As you are working with people, you may come to a point where suddenly you're working with someone and you go, what do I do? And some of these things will come back to mind, and you will suddenly realize, oh, this is what that's talking about. I can do this. When I started doing this work, I actually felt like I was finally understanding what is really happening in real spiritual warfare, in real spiritual work. And like I said, I actually kind of backed away from it because there was so much, I was getting attacked. There were different things. I was a little bit unsure of myself. People were saying, well, you're not trained. But as I basically continued to work with this, I came to realize, no, this is actually real. I know it's real. I've experienced it, and I'm going to have confidence in it. And I'm going to just go ahead and put it forth like I've experienced it. And let you take and you do with it what you want. The reason why I made this free is because I wanted to be able to talk openly about this stuff. And I didn't want someone who was paying for a class feeling like, okay, you said something that offended my religious belief and blah, 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 therefore I want my money back. I didn't collect any money from you. So, if you don't like something, just don't use it. All right. Let me see if there's any other questions. I have had the bottle brush flowers. Yes, they're very beautiful. And I think that's a very nice flower essence. Someone said, I have a younger brother that's alcoholic and uses drugs. He has been in and out of hospital and rehab since February. I came to a point where I did not know how to pray for him, so I put it totally in God's hands and asked God's will be done. After hearing you tonight, I'm going to see him whole and healed in my mind and listen for God's direction about how to help him. And you can also, as I said, see him whole and healed, and also say, is there anything that I can do to help him, to protect him, to remove from him the negative, evil influences that are working on him, and see that in your mind, and see that being corrected in your mind, and holding on to that image in faith. Wayne Dyer tells an interesting story, and Wayne Dyer is not, somebody I would consider to be an Orthodox Christian by any means, but again, all these tools work. It's just how you use them, and how you use them is up to you, for good or for evil. But he had a woman who was estranged from her daughter, and he told her that she should just every single day picture in her mind the relationship she wanted with her daughter, and imagine that, and imagine how good it would feel, and do nothing other than that. And after she had been doing this for several months, her daughter called and wanted to reconcile with her, and everything worked out fine. You win the battle inside of your soul before you win it in the real world. You have to change the inner world to change the outer world. That's what I've learned through emotional healing. I might also mention there was another example of that I had, and it slipped my mind, but so that's acknowledgement, appreciation, gratitude are very helpful for that. Okay, let's see. Is there anything else? Some people, the Emotional Healing Intensive. I actually think I've got it up on the website. It is now scheduled for January 18th, 19th, and 20th here in St. George, Utah. You can call 800 416-2887, or go to the website to register for the 2019 Emotional Healing Intensive. St. George tends to be rather nice in the winter. It rains sometimes, but usually the temperature in the daytime is in the 40s or 50s. So if you live in a cold climate, it might be a nice time to get away. But we actually put all this stuff into practice, and you get a chance to have practical experience with it. I might also mention I will be again sometime, hopefully by this week, sending out the registration for Module 4. Those of you who don't know about our emotional healing charts, again, those are available if any of you have ordered them. We appreciate that. They're very, very good tools for helping you in this work. Also, I mentioned that there is a paid class, the Fundamentals of Natural Healing Module 4 at $75. That starts this Thursday. That class gets into the herbs and supplements that you can use to help people in emotional healing, because you can use those. You can use those to help people weaned off drugs. You can use them as transitions to kind of help them feel better so they're open to doing emotional healing work with you. So we're going to talk about that more physical part of this healing process in that class. Like I said, it's only $75. So if you're interested in that aspect of it, please sign up for that module. You can sign up for that at treelight.com, treelit.com, or there's a link to the shopping cart from stephenhorn.com. So you can register for that. Thanks for being part of this module. This module covered all of the key tools. These classes are not going to be part of Nature's Institute, at least not anytime soon. I am going to create a certification program, which means that I am going to create, when I get all of these modules done, I'm going to create some homework exercises, quizzes, and things that you can pay to, for the certification program, which will include having to attend live workshops. So you can get certified for it. But of course, I just want to make all the information available for free to everyone. Again, appreciate all of you for supporting this class. Hope that you enjoyed it. Hope that these tools, that you will use them to bless the lives of people. I hope that you will start, practicing some of these things, whatever you feel comfortable with, and putting them in practice, because there are so many people who need this work, who need this healing work. And I can't help them all myself. I want to spread this out and give more information to help people be able to use this stuff like I've been able to use this stuff to help people. So thanks, everybody, and good night.